So, before you start your timer, some instructions. So in this part of the competition, you've assumed a fictional business identity. And I can see from your executive summary that you're the board of directors of the company that you're presenting to. So we all know who we are before we start. You're going to have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical aspects of the problem that you've identified. During that time, we will not interrupt you. But when you're done, I'll spend the next 10 or 15 minutes asking you questions, staying in our fictional roles. When that's done, I'll give you an instruction to take a deep breath and relax, because at that point we're done, and we'll give you some feedback. And at that time, we'll also tell you a little bit about ourselves, so you know who these strangers were watching the presentation. So if you are ready, I will start my timer. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, go.
A few weeks ago, Repsol, the #1 oil company in Spain, was sued by Iberdrola, one of its main competitors in the energy industry. Repsol was accused for greenwashing and illegal competition practices. Obviously, accusations of this magnitude could be really harmful for a company, especially for one like Repsol, a leader in the European fossil fuel industry. Today, we are here in front of you, the board of directors of Repsol, because you have hired us to analyze a project that you have recently started, the Motor Verde project, which in English means green engine. However, we haven't only analyzed this project. We have also proposed and we have come up with an alternative idea that could serve as a better option with a greater impact and to suit better your objectives. However, in case you're not familiar with the Motor Verde initiative or the Motor Verde project, we will now give a little summary on what it is and what are the main objectives of it. Yes. Okay. The Motor Verde project has the objective of the reforestation of 70,000 hectares across 3 different forests in both Spain and Portugal. And it has 2 main environmental objectives. Firstly, the absorption of 16 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, as well as the enhancement of the biodiversity through the inclusion of indigenous species. However, it has also some goals in terms of economic and social matter. Through the creation of new job opportunities and the implementation of job programs, as well as through the injection of 100 million euros into rural economies. The Motor Verde project is a part of the carbon credit market. And for you to properly understand this, my partner Adela will now explain what this is and all the regulatory aspects surrounding the Motor Verde project.
Okay, knowing that Motor Verde project is inside the carbon credits market, it's helpful to differentiate between 2 kinds of market, the mandatory and the voluntary one. Its main differences radicate in 3 variables: its purpose, the use of carbon credits, and the regulation. The first difference is the purpose. So the mandatory market objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And how does it function? By the allocation of a maximum limit driven by government policies and legally binding agreements. On the other hand, the voluntary market tries to offset the carbon footprint. Institutions and governments that are inside this market enter the market because of reasons such as corporate social responsibility or interests in image or sustainability. Here, it's important to mention the United Nations Net Zero goal for 2015. You're gonna better understand this when we explain what carbon credits are, but it is that they try to balance greenhouse gas emissions with carbon credits to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees. So what cannot be reduced with the certificates of the mandatory market, it's going to be compensated with the carbon credits. So, as I have already mentioned, in the mandatory market, there are no credits. They use certifications given to those institutions that follow the maximum limits established by the agreements or protocols. On the other hand, the voluntary market uses carbon credits. So what is a carbon credit? It's a certification that equals 1 ton of CO2 not emitted into the atmosphere. And there are two kinds of credits, the avoidance and the removal ones. The first one's objective is to reduce future greenhouse gas emissions that would have otherwise been emitted into the atmosphere by projects such as energy efficiency, renewable energy, or fuel changes. On the other hand, we have the removal credits, which are the ones that try to absorb the emissions that have already been emitted into the atmosphere and ensure their long-term storage. Chris will further explain this. Here you know that Motor Verde is inside this type of credits because your projects are reforestation. It's important to mention that currently the avoidance credits compose the 90% of the credit carbon market, but it's expected a huge growth in the removal credits because of its quality. The last difference was the regulation. I'm not going to explain very further the mandatory market because your project is in the voluntary one, but it's interesting to know that the mandatory market is composed by institutions and governments that have accepted the different protocols and agreements, and that the first response of countries regarding climate change was the Kyoto Protocol, followed by these other important agreements. On the other hand, we have the voluntary market, that it is not as regulated as the mandatory one, but this doesn't mean that it's under no control. Here is where verification agents come. They are a very important agent in the market because they have a key function. They establish and determine the standards that must be followed by institutions to certificate those credits. So the most important ones are Société Générale de Surveillance and Gold Standard. There are international agents. As you know, your projects, the reforestation of Motor Verde, are registered with the Spanish Office of Climate Change.
Now that Adela has explained the carbon credit market and all the regulatory aspects surrounding the Motor Verde project, our partner Margarita will further explain the evolution of the carbon credit market as well as Repsol's current situation in terms of emissions and sustainability, in order for you to understand the potential of this market and also the current situation of Repsol.
So we are going to provide you a little bit of context of carbon emissions, showing you this graph which provides the distribution of total carbon emissions. As you can observe, the Australian and US market have the highest volume of carbon emissions. Meanwhile, the US represents less than 25% of total carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and it is the one which implements more measures and regulations in order to combat the emissions they originate. And it is where Repsol mainly operates. This scenario offers a great opportunity of the implementations of projects such as Motor Verde, which that positions Repsol at the front of the fight against climate change. And an interesting aspect to study from an economic perspective is how prices are evolving in the voluntary market and the demand's trajectory. As you can observe, experts ensure that demand is experiencing a progressive increase and reaching up to, in 2030, to 1.5 to 2 billion tons of CO2, having a market size from 5 trillion to 30 trillion. And in only 25 years, we could be talking about having 30 billion tons of CO2 in 2050 and a market size of 50 trillion. So that's why we can observe that this market is promising and we should be continuing in this path and be involved in it. And this is reported by Repsol, and it shows the Repsol's total pollution over the last 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. showing how Repsol has reduced all their carbon emissions from 25 million in 2018 to 15 in 2023. So you're doing a good job in reducing these emissions, but we're talking of a great problem, and we should improve these solutions in order to be more effective to address climate change and carbon emissions.
As Margarita has explained, your company is headed in a good direction, reducing their emissions by the year. However, due to the mentioned lawsuit, it is true that Repsol needs to go one step further. The Motor Verde could be a good alternative for this, but we think that there are some aspects of it that could be questionable in terms of sustainability and ethics. And our partner Diego will now explain this analysis.
Thank you, Telmo. In this section, we will analyze Repsol reforestation project from an ethical and sustainable perspective. Before starting with analysis, it's important to highlight that Repsol reforestation project focuses on SDG 13, which refers to climate action. In this particular case, we will focus specifically on carbon emissions. It's important to note that this analysis will have 4 components, which are risk, credit quality and additionality, stakeholder complacency, and finally, greenwashing. First, we'll start with risk. Although reforestation projects such as Motor Verde are implemented with the aim of significantly reduce carbon emissions, it's important to know that it can also have negative effects if it is implemented on a large scale. Those negative effects are fire risk, loss of biodiversity, introduction of non-native species, reduced soil quality, and altered water cycles. Of all these negative effects that I have mentioned, the most relevant one is fire risk, because the emissions of the forest fire represent 20% of all the CO2 emissions in the world. And according to some studies, it's predicted that it will increase 20% until 2050. The second element is credit quality. To measure credit quality, we need to focus on additionality. So what is additionality? It is the determination of whether an intervention has a positive impact when compared to a baseline. It is a key principle in the evaluation of mitigation of projects that mitigates climate change, including reforestation. A carbon project is considered additional if it has resulted in emissions removals or reduction that wouldn't have occurred without the project existing. And what does lack of additionality implies? Well, lack of additionality can undermine the effectiveness and the integrity of the project, in this case, the reforestation project. Thirdly, we have the stakeholder complacency. So we need to define what is complacency. It is a feeling of satisfaction, often while unaware of some potential danger or effects. In this case, in the reforestation project, Motor Verde of Repsol, there is a high risk that the stakeholders involved are experiencing the complacency. Why do we say this? Because the credit buyers, such as Repsol, are still investing in this type of project despite this risk that I have mentioned and despite the fact that projects such as reforestation have limited additionality. Also, the government hasn't changed the regulation, which is another of the stakeholders. And finally, the credit developers are still developing this type of projects. The main consequence of experiencing complacency lies not only in the implementation of projects such as reforestation that doesn't reduce significantly the carbon emissions, but the main problem lies in the failure to implement projects that significantly reduce the carbon emissions that we have mentioned. Finally, we have greenwashing. This is the most relevant component because it relates the previous components that I have mentioned before. And also, as my partner Telmo mentioned, this is the reason why Repsol has been criticized and also sued. As I have done before, I will first start by defining this term. Greenwashing is the act of making false and misleading statements about the environment benefits that a project or practice can have. A company that engages in greenwashing is clearly aware that the project they are implementing is not generating the impact that in the eyes of the public they claim they are. In this case, there is a big risk that Repsol is engaging in a practice of greenwashing with its project Motor Verde. Why do we say this? Because reforestation projects, they have the lowest durability in terms of carbon storage. They also have a limited additionality, as we mentioned before, and as we also mentioned before, there are negative effects that can derive from this type of projects. So the people may say that Repsol is implementing this type of project, reforestation projects, because this is the most affordable projects in terms of economic aspects, and also because it implies the lowest implication throughout the process of its implementation. Therefore, the reading that can be made from the situation is that Repsol may be implementing this project for the sole purpose of image and profitability. Considering that greenwashing is a practice that deserves serious questioning, it's very important that you, the board of directors of Repsol, seriously consider the implementation of reforestation projects such as Motor Verde.
Now that Diego has explained all the inconveniences that come with the Motor Verde project, as well as other possible negative aspects, our partner Cristina will share with you our proposal and alternative option to reforestation.
So, our proposal for you to turn around this situation is to replace reforestation projects by carbon farming projects. What is carbon farming? Carbon farming is an agricultural practice which is designed to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in the soil in the form of organic matter. So we're first going to understand this process in technical terms, but really quickly. So first, CO2 is captured through the photosynthesis of plants. It is then stored in the soil in the form of organic matter, and this is called soil carbon sequestration. So it is settled as plants grow and develop. And thirdly, this continuous development also promotes further growth, improves soil quality, and improves the soil structure. And this stimulates further plant growth and other crops to grow. So, as well as the agricultural benefits that carbon farming may have, they also contribute significantly to the improvement of several SDGs, such as SDG 13, which is climate action, SDG 15, which is life on land, and SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy. But we're now going to present how a carbon farming project would counteract the ethical and sustainable dilemmas which were posed by the reforestation project of Motor Verde. So first, carbon farming would be a better solution to improve all the risks that reforestation projects pose. For example, it would reduce the fire risk. It will also promote crop diversity and rotation. It would promote water conservation and improve soil structure, as well as reduce the soil degradation, as we have explained before. Secondly, it will also increase the additionality of this project, and therefore we would obtain greater carbon credits from this project. So regarding this, carbon storage would be much greater with the carbon farming project, and this additionality would also last for a longer amount of time than that of reforestation projects. Thirdly, it would also encourage a reduction of stakeholder complacency. Why? Because stakeholders would be constantly involved in this process, as it requires a constant involvement, a constant study, and like a greater analysis of how the project would be going. This also encourages constant investment, which facilitates innovation and development on this area. Also, it would generate some economic benefits for the local communities surrounding this project, which would also truly benefit, for example, all the cities or all the communities around, and would also improve some SDG 2, which is the one related to hunger, as it would provide some food also for the communities around. And lastly, this kind of project also involves long-term commitment, which would ensure us that this project's effect would be lasting for a longer amount of time. Lastly, we have seen that Repsol has been criticized for for greenwashing. However, the carbon farming project would generate really tangible, real and measurable results, which could enable us to protect ourselves against these critics, which are really harmful for our company and also for the environment if they are real. This project of carbon farming would allow us to have concrete evidence of our actions to back up the claims we make about our solution to this problem. So therefore, we have seen that this proposal not only counteracts the ethical and the sustainable dilemmas that were presented by reforestation projects, but it also complies with the regulatory aspects of this market, and is also in line with the current demand the demand that is in this market in economic terms. So legally, we would encourage Repsol to change the agent that is certifying our project. Right now, it is the Spanish office. However, the Spanish Office of Climate Change. However, we would encourage you to change this to a gold standard, as Repsol is an international company which operates in many countries, and this would enable us to use a very trustworthy agent to really certify the impact and the sustainability of the project we're implementing. On the second hand, we know that there is a growing demand for removal credits in the market. However, this demand is differing from reforestation projects. It is now more going towards some credits which come from for some projects of better quality, such as carbon farming. And lastly, we have seen that carbon farming improves the credit quality in all its ethical and sustainable terms, and therefore responds to all the ethical dilemmas presented by reforestation, which are risks, stakeholder complacency, lack of additionality, and of course greenwashing.
Well, to sum all of this up, your company, Repsol, is doing a great job to fight climate change. However, we think that if you were to change reforestation for carbon farming, you would have an even greater impact on the environment. And on the other hand, it would be also a very good way to fight against those accusations of greenwashing and the lawsuit that you're right now having to face. So, thank you very much for your time, and we're open to any questions you might have.
Okay, good. A couple of minutes left there, but let me just reset this. Is there any reason why we couldn't do both carbon farming and reforestation? Wouldn't that be even better?
Yes, but what we're saying is that it's true that this could be better. Maybe it could be a possibility to do both projects. However, the problem of greenwashing would only be associated with reforestation projects because of the lack of quality of its carbon credits. So if what we're proposing is we're not proposing to stop working in this market, but to like go towards another direction which would really make a more sustainable impact and have a real impact and reduce all the risks that reforestation actually creates. Because our intention is first to reduce the critics for greenwashing, and then also not only for our company but also for the environment, to really make an action that contributes sustainably and to reduce climate change in real terms. So that is why it's like we believe that implementing all this investment, like yes, investing all this money in a different type of project, which is similar and is in the same direction, but is much more efficient to reduce climate change, would be much better for us and for the environment.
If you let me can I
Sure,
add something?
sure.
Yes, it also has to be known that reforestation is the most widespread project. Maybe because it is the most economically affordable, it requires lowest implication throughout its process of implementation. So we think that if other competitors or companies are already applying that project that reduces carbon emissions but doesn't reduce as much as this type of project, we think that it would be better not only for reputation, for terms of reputation, but also it will have a better impact. And as I said before, they are already implementing reforestation projects, and carbon farming is not being as implemented as reforestation projects.
So as carbon farming is a more effective program and also maybe more favorably seen by the marketplace, it sounds like it's probably more expensive. So have we considered how we're going to fund that? Will we have to compress margins? Will we raise prices? Will there be some kind of other offset of expense? So have we considered the impact to the bottom line?
Right now, the Motor Verde project is being funded by Crédit Agricole as well as by Portobello Capital. It's a project with 100 million euros in funding. So we think that if some of the money that is being directed towards reforestation were to be transitioned to carbon farming, not as we said, it cannot be a transition of 100% from one day to another, but at least if these projects start to be done, we think that the money is available, and we think that the impact can be really positive, not only from Repsol directly, but also as an influence to other companies to start with initiatives like this one.
Sorry,
No.
as you are already in the voluntary market, we assume you have interests in image and sustainability, also social corporate responsibility. So we assume that your interest in this can motivate the investment also with the funds, but with Repsol's money too.
And sorry, lastly, I just wanted to add that it is true that these type of projects are much costly. However, as we have explained before, the demand for this type of credits is going to grow a lot. So maybe the investment we're putting in now would have like a greater, maybe we would have to invest some extra money now, but we are going to obtain this return on the investment in some years' time, because we know, like we have seen that the expected evolution of the removal in the portfolio mix of companies is going to grow a lot. And here we can see that, for example, removal credits are growing a lot, while reforestation, like avoidance credits involving also reforestation, are going to reduce, and the growth is at each time slower. So although we may invest through, I don't know, maybe asking for Portobello Capital or Crédit Agricole for more financing and searching for more investors to face these extra costs, this would benefit us in a longer term, and this would this would enable us also to further invest in these type of projects in the future.
Can I add just one thing? Yeah, it's not only good in terms of reputation, because it will be a project that truly reduce the carbon emissions, but also it's a good investment, because when you are sued, it's very expensive also to the sanctions that you can have, and also if you are sued and they declare you guilty, also your reputation can go down, and that also represents a big cost.
you mentioned the concept of reforestation. Suppose we decided to implement a plan that included that. It has collateral benefits. Someday the forest grows up and we cut it down and use it for wood and reforest it again. So it has some attractiveness. But where are you going to get the land?
Yes, but like what we're proposing is to substitute reforestation projects for a carbon farming. So really, that is one of the main projects that one of the main problems that reforestation problems pose, because there is not enough land to to plant all these, and also forests have like a really limited additionality for a carbon to capture carbon emissions. So, however, for example, in the case of carbon farming, we would need a more reduced amount of land to implement the project, which would be easier to get. And then also, as it is constantly regenerative agriculture, it is constantly like regenerating the ground. So the additionality would last for a longer time using a less amount of land, which would be obtained the same way as we could have obtained the land for reforestation, and it would be like constantly working to capture carbon emissions and constantly regenerate.
Has anyone anywhere on the planet effectively implemented this carbon program? Where?
Yes, we have the example of coin farming, which is really known. Well, it is a really ongoing and growing enterprise in Spain, and it works in Galicia, which is in the north of Spain, and it's looking for land and for current projects current agricultural lands, which where it can implement this project, and it is being really successful. And in fact, they are growing a lot because they're having a lot of buyers of these carbon credits obtained from this project. Like, this is just one example, but we could have many others. And they have spoken, for example, to really renowned enterprises worldwide, which are following this direction.
So it's wonderful that consultants come in and advise us as board members, but it always comes with a price tag. So how are we gonna make more money to cover your expenses, your costs, and to cover the costs of the carbon farming? Where's the money gonna come from?
As we explained during the economic evaluation of the carbon credit market, of course, the voluntary market is growing at a rapid pace, and the expectations for its growth are tremendous. And not only that, but also the market is demanding for quality credits. So we think that not only as a reputational move, say, but also as a strategical move in order to get economical benefits, the investment on carbon credits that are of good quality and that are really appreciated, let's say, by the demand of the market, could be a great investment for the future.
And sorry, I just wanted to add that just to prove to you our commitment to this project and all the knowledge we have from this future, we would tell you that maybe you wouldn't have to pay especially for our services like right now, but also maybe give us like a portion of the benefits you would obtain with this project, and this way we would prove our commitment and how sure we are that this project will really be a very good solution to your problem.
Any more questions from any of the judges?
That's it for me.
I'm curious about, have we talked to our marketing team for how they're going to present this to the world? Are we going to rebrand our logo or add more? How are we going to get this out in the world so that our reputation, people know that we're doing this and our reputation should increase?
I think that this is a very delicate matter because, of course, when you try to promote all your environmentally positive initiatives, that could sound as greenwashing, especially if you're being accused of things like that. So maybe the way to go could be to not so much be in the need to share this with everyone, but more to get efficient results and to carry out these initiatives, not talk about them before you do them, but after that you can give the results.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the clock, take a deep breath. That was very impressive. The fact that you weren't reading, you were talking to us, which is how you would do it if it was an actual board. And one of the things to keep in mind is that for your whole working life, you will be doing presentations like this. And you will be the people in the room who know more than anybody else. You're the experts. And whether you're working for a company and you've been there for 20 years, you still, on this particular topic, you've studied it, you've looked at it, and you did a really great job of communicating that to us, one-on-one. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the structure, adding, you know, the context at each layer. So I feel like each presenter came up and kind of started with a broader picture and zoomed in a little bit. So that's helpful to kind of understand where we're coming from and heading. So yeah, I appreciated those handoffs and kind of the way we provided some context. I think I mean, speaking of like work life and future presentations to come, I feel like that's often missed. People step into a room, they start talking, they assume everybody knows where they're coming from or has the right background info, and often that's not the case. So, and then, yeah, I mean, one thing I'm curious still more about, and maybe could have used a slightly deeper dive, is just like more like a slide on this, more the specifics of carbon farming. I guess reforestation generally, planting trees, I think that's conceptually easier to grasp, but carbon farming, I feel like less of a firm understanding of the mechanics of that one. So I'm curious myself to understand that a little bit more, but that's one thing that I think I would flesh out a little, spend more time on. Yeah, that's some thought.
Thank you.
Feedback time?
Sure.
I notice we have an executive summary, and in it, it identifies each of you by name and by major. Two of you are apparently economics majors. I'm just a lawyer. And my experience has been that economics majors are taught how to be confusing. So nobody will ever fully understand what they're saying, and therefore they can't be criticized.
I thought that's what lawyers do.
Because in order to criticize you, I have to indicate that I understand you. So I'm giving you a piece of free advice. Don't fall into that. Years ago, I had a good friend who was the chairman of a New York Stock Exchange company. He was a very wealthy guy. And he brought me out to his farm one day outside of Chicago. And we had lunch and spent the afternoon water skiing on his private lake. And I said to him at dinner, Bob, when you have the president of Westinghouse and General Electric and companies like that here for dinner, what do you talk about? He thought for a minute as though no one had ever asked him that question before. And he said, we talk about essence. So what does that mean? So let's say we're talking about religion. We talk about the essence of religion. What differentiates religion from academia, for example? I suggest to all of you, the business and law majors as well as the economics majors, that you get in touch with essence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. It's all the wisdom you're gonna get out of me.
So I thought it'd be a nice idea to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. And I have to confess,
You don't know.
I started out as a lawyer. So I tell people that I'm a recovering lawyer.
Me too.
As an undergraduate, I went to Princeton University and then spent 2 years living and working in Brazil. I got fluent in Portuguese to the point where the United States government hired me as an interpreter. And when they would have guests of the US government come to the United States, when I was on school breaks, I would travel around the country with them for 30 days, just translating. And then they also sent me to sub-Saharan Africa, to former Portuguese colonies, to teach on 2-week assignments. So I was on live television in Mozambique, and somebody told me that I had a face made for radio. I retired 2 years ago from a British aerospace company. It's a very interesting company for a number of reasons. They started in the aerospace business before there was such a thing. In 1850, somebody invented an altimeter for hot air balloons, which measured the height of the balloon above the surface of the earth. And Queen Victoria in England was so impressed that she gave them a royal charter. And today they make something on everything that flies, even the International Space Station. So all of that was by way of saying that I worked with a lot of people who are much smarter than I am.
My name's Jeremy. I work for Ares Management Corporation. I'm a principal in the accounting group. Ares is an alternative investment manager with global operations. And we do real estate, private equity and credit, with credit being the largest. I'm still doing it, haven't retired yet. I look forward to the day, but yeah, that is my background.
So I'm gonna follow up on something you said. There's 2 guys in a balloon, and they're flying across the country, and the clouds coming underneath them, and they get hopelessly lost. Finally, there's a break in the clouds, and they're looking down at an intersection in a small town. There's a couple of people on the street, and they lean out of the basket, and they shout down to the people on the ground, "Where are we?" And one of the people on the ground says, "In a balloon." And one of the guys says, "That fellow's a lawyer." "How do you know?" "Because he just gave us some information which is absolutely true and perfectly useless." Thank you for your participation.
Do you have any questions? No?
Do you have any tips that could improve us for future presentations?
Well, I was dazzled that a consulting group actually suggested not charging the companies. That's how much you believe in what you're recommending. So that was very persuasive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.